Okay. Well, welcome back to the World Autism Summit, everybody. And I'd love to welcome H.M. Skip Kingston, who's a PhD professor. And Skip Kingston received a BS in chemistry and an MS in analytical chemistry, both from Indiana University of Pennsylvania.
Here we go. And that would be number 2. So here we go. All right, so you should be seeing my slides. And because I don't want to go through a presentation in detail, I want to skip around a bit. I'm going to leave it in this mode. So, for example, before we started, could you see that slide?
Yes.
Okay. So before we started, we got money, several $100,000 to convene 2 medical conferences. One I held at Duquesne University and one at the Medical School of West Virginia, okay, at the university. We invited people to come in and criticize the $1.5 million autism study we were about to make, because that's how you really do good science. I brought a lot of MD, PhDs in. For example, one of the 21 biomarkers we found in autism was a guess by one of the reviewers of my work, say, before we get started, I want you to review this. So we paid them each $5,000 to review in great detail. And he said, I can't justify it, but I have a hunch. Well, we were doing 406 parameters. So after the review, we increased it to 409 parameters. And sure enough, that guess from that MD, PhD turned out to be a biomarker. So sometimes it's just a really educated, really experienced MD saying, I haven't done the research on this, but here's what I'm seeing, and I'm giving you the best guess I have. And it turned out to be true. So now at the present time, so we have 21 biomarkers that we've published. Later on this year, we're trying to open up something like a 23andMe where people around the world be able to get measurements on toxins in their system. And this is being sponsored by the Eden Project. If you don't know about this, this is King Charles's his main effort in environmental human health assessment for the last 20 years. And they're funding this research. Now, so how is our measurement different than other people's measurements? So I have kind of a funny way of explaining this. So our measurements are now adopted by EPA, the Department of Defense, Center for Disease Control, and in many, many countries worldwide. Why are they different? And we've got 50 patents on them. So let me make it very simple. So here it is. When you take an analog measurement, this would be like an X-ray. X-ray can only show you so many things. As you know, on a record, when you scratch it, you hear the scratch every time it goes around. Now, you've seen scratches on CDs, but you don't hear them. The reason you don't hear them is there's redundant mathematics, which puts in what's missing from the scratch. So therefore, it's like it wasn't missing. It's all mathematics. Everything I do is pure mathematics. There are no analytical steps. So, for example, out of one of my methods, this is some of the math, okay, that you get from method 6800 that Department of Defense uses for Homeland Defense. And by the way, that's still classified, what I do for them. But here's a very nice picture that explains it. Here's an analog where you direct what you see in an X-ray, but you can only see so much. This is an MRI. It's pure mathematics. There is no picture. There's only mathematics, which is then made into a picture, which has far more fidelity. So these are some of my mathematics here, and that's why we have so much more fidelity and data that is much more certain for the doctor to make his adjustments on. They want this, they don't want this anymore. Okay, so this is what they want. So that's what's different about our measurements. So for example, mine is one of the few patented ones that the government says you got to go to his company and talk to him and he'll help you. So, for example, one of the measurements that the MDs in autism told me that they needed, which was crucial to them, was being argued by 3 orders of magnitude what the measurement should be. Is it 10 to 1, 100 to 1, 200 to 1, or 1,000 to 1? And nobody could agree in the world. The reason is because as soon as you pull it out of the vein, it starts to change in the presence of oxygen and air and everything. So in the body, it's one form, but outside the body, it's something else. So we came up with a way of putting the isotopes into the tube where the blood is drawn, and then making the measurement of the reduced glutathione and the oxidized glutathione, which, by the way, is a 100-to-1 ratio, not a 10, not a 200, not a 1,000. We now make this measurement to plus or minus 5%. It is one of our biomarkers. And for example, the hospital, we were doing a measurement study where we put children in a clean room. And the nurse called me up one day and asked, how is child 6 doing? I said, oh, they should be improving. I said, how? She said, how can you know that? You haven't even seen the child. I said, no, I don't need to. I said, I have the measurements in front of them that the doctor and I have been working on. She says, well, go check child number 8. So I did. I said, no, the child is not improving. And she says, that's her twin sister, and she's not improving. How could you know that? I said, that's why we're doing it this way. Okay. The measurements in her blood tell me what's happening to the child, and that's what the doctor needs. So the poor nurse was beside herself. You can tell this from their blood? I said, yes, that's why we're doing the new measurements. Okay, so now you see why it's important to do measurements. So here's a picture of how you would design such a study. This is the MD I work with, Dr. Scott Faber. This is my wonderful, wonderful phlebotomist. She has 2 autistic children herself, and she is just a miracle worker in drawing the blood. What did my study show? Let me show you some data from just my 5-year-olds. Now, here are the controls and the children of 5 years old. What you see with that little line going across, above that is a part per million, up to 12 parts per million of something like hexane, or the phthalates that you find in the plastic that they drink from, or acetochlor, which is a known endocrine disruptor. Okay, and then now I have measurements which are much below here, but they're very significant. But this just gives you some idea of how many toxins are in these children. Okay, both the controls and the autistic children themselves. Now, then we compared this with the national database. So here's the national database from the CDC, which they do this every 2 years. Now, the salmon colored is what the average would be for children of this age that I looked at. The blue is my control, and the red, of course, are my autistic children. Now, this is a log scale, which means over here, my children and my patients in Pittsburgh are both an order of magnitude, a log scale order of magnitude above the national average of benzene or chlorpyrifos, which is a nerve agent. You actually kill the bugs with nerve death. Well, that's not good for you either. And we're now putting that corn in 1,000-pound quantities. Okay. All right. So then what did we find? So here are the children. So what we found was the controls, and you notice there some of them are as high in this particular measurement and these are all the different categories. So everybody was thinking, what's the bad guy? Which of the toxins is it that's doing this? It's not one toxin. It's the preponderance of all of the toxins in the burden load of the individuals. Now, my controls, as you notice, had no correlation with their autism scale because we had them take the tests as well. Yet look at the patients. These are children who are on the spectrum, have been diagnosed with using the ADOS scale by professionals and ranked. Notice they almost double or triple their inability to use their brain as effectively as the toxins go higher in their system. Now, when we published this in Nature Scientific Reports, the entire world said, we never thought to look at that.
Oh, good Lord.
Now, we think this has significance, okay? And so here is an example. Now, I have another example for you of why we need to measure. Very clear and I have permission from the father to do this, or I would not be showing it to you. Here it is. One of the MDs at one of the conferences heard me talk and Dr. Faber talk, and he called me up later and said, Skip, I need your help. You can make those special measurements that nobody else can make. My child is 9 years old and he's going into puberty. He's getting aggressive. His hormones are out of control. Will you measure his blood? I said, of course I will. I did it for free. I said, but this individual, send me your blood too. so that I can compare your blood to your child's blood. He says, yeah, he lives 18 hours a day in the house with me. I said, okay, this could tell us something. Well, you can see where the son and the father have much in common. Here, however, the father has 0 acetylchlor, and the child is at 1/10 of a part per million. Now, acetylchlor is an endocrine disruptor. Its exact effect is turning on the endocrine system to turn on the system saying, oh, no, you're 18, you're not 9 years old. And your hormones need to kick into gear. So I called the father. He said, how could this be? He lives in the house with me 18 hours a day. I said, do you live near a golf course? He says, oh, there's one across the street. Oh. Does your son ever play in the golf course? Oh, I can't keep him out of the sand traps. To get him off the golf course. That's why there are no dandelions. And that has just triggered his endocrine system to make him think he's 18 or 20 years old. Oh. After 6 months, the father, MD, calls me and says, he's back to normal. He's lost all of his pubic hair. He's no longer aggressive, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. Getting him away from the acetylchlor made all the difference in his health. How do I thank you? I said, you just did. Okay, let's go out there, though, and do this. He wants to send blood samples to me. This is why we're, at the end of the year, probably going to be opening up a lab to be able to do that for MDs around the world who can prescribe, gee, I want your blood measured. For example, everybody's turned on the news recently and heard, oh, if you have used Roundup, call our law firm if you get, right? Because it gives you a certain disease. Okay, and that happens to be the major ingredient in Roundup. Okay, so we don't want that. We want to prevent that. So how is it different? So here's conceptually, I want to get away from the blood draw, which requires a phlebotomist, and move over to the finger stick. This requires only about 20 microliters, where here you're drawing each tube is about 5 mil, and a child can only have that done at 2 years old or under, about twice a year. Here, it's essentially unlimited. Now, what this also opens you up for is this next slide. You can be in a mud hut or a tent in the Sahara Desert and still do a finger prick. And by the way, you can't send blood tubes across international boundaries because they have pathogens in them. But once the blood card is dried, they are accepted across all international boundaries and can be mailed to laboratories worldwide. Have you some idea how this would improve the health situation for a child? For example, let's suppose in this hut in, let's say, Vietnam, and how they take their blood and send it to a very advanced lab in the US or in Germany or somewhere and say, you have something which could be a problem down the road and we would like to help you prevent it. And then the MDs take over, right? But if they don't know it's there, they can't do anything. Just like this was the doctor, remember, he had no idea what was wrong with his own son until he looked at the data and said, oh, fix this. And he did. All right. Now, my new measurement is critical to making this because there's so little blood. We have this new measurement. The LLOQ is the lower limit of quantification, and frequently the measurement is down here below that. So we've come up with a way of amplifying the signal so that now that small amount of blood can give you the biomarkers 20 or 30 at a time. And we can do it on a sterile card, which can be shipped worldwide. And that's what the new patent is about. That's what the Europeans said, oh, here's your patent. We love it. And the US Patent Office said, oh, we love it. Here's your patent. We're not going to examine it anymore. And so they both did that because they realized the significance of this. And they're in the process of issuing this. But we want to help the world. Now, how does that work? So let me give you an example. With my isotopes added, as you go lower and lower and lower, okay, the red is what happens to a calibration curve. Notice you're off by 200% at the lower level. Well, guess where very significant things in the human body need to be measured? At very low levels. If you look at the black here, those are my isotopes, and I hold it all the way down to where the calibration curve is off by 200%, and we are still overlapping at the 95% confidence limit with the correct answer. Now, a doctor needs the correct answer, not a page full of wrong answers that he has to make a guess on. Yeah. He needs to rely on them. These are people's lives. These are people's And the doctor wants to do the best job he can.
Mhm.
So therefore, by combining my technology with the doctor's technology of being able to interpret it and use it to help the patient, we can do that. Now, let me show you something which is going to, I'm afraid, make you very skeptical of other labs. So here is a commercial lab, and here are the certified values. So I sent to commercial lab NIST, National Institute of Standards and Technology, serum standards to have them analyze them as if they were serum from a patient. And I didn't tell them, I just put a number on it. The round red circles are what they sent me back. The black is the 95% confidence limit of the certified correct answer. Notice that commercial lab never gave me one correct answer, not one. Now, I'm doing it two different ways. The blue is a calibration curve, but very carefully controlled. The green are my isotopes. Notice I always get the correct answer on both and the certified value. That is what the doctor needs. Now, when I show this at medical conferences, you have some idea why the doctors say, no, we want you to do our measurements. So that's why at the end of the year, we're hoping to set up a lab that will be able to do that in high volume, but in high quality as well.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Now that takes, by the way, an awful lot of equipment. I mean, there's $2 million here. I'm about to show you in 2 slides. Okay. So this is not your mom and pop's laboratory. Okay. These are mass spectrometers, which cost minimum of $250,000 a piece to $500,000. And it's a center of excellence, of which there are only 3 in the country. Okay. That I have. Then I've done this with a lot of my students, by the way. This is Matt, as you know. Well, he is a business person who used to run a core lab at Harvard University for 3 Nobel Prize winners, okay? Now, this takes many skills. It takes the MDs. It takes the businessman. It takes the scientist. It takes the metrologist. It takes my students, okay? There's one student, he's not in this picture, he used to sleep on the floor in this office when the blood was running at night. He said, Skip, that's somebody's life in there. What if the machine needs me in the middle of the night? I live an hour away. We could lose that sample. That's how conscientious my student was, okay? We didn't lose one sample in 300,000 measurements. It's also fully automated with robots, by the way. Okay. So, well, for example, if you look back here, I think, you can see the robots that run the machine. Okay. So this is not your typical instrument. You talk to the robots, they run the mass spectrometer. Okay. Right. So now what do we want to do? We want to help with the MDs be able to make this. And we're working with many laboratories and people. The vision is improve the worldwide human health assessment, enabling preventative medicine based on high quality measurements or facts, not guesses.
That's good.
Okay, now I just have to step back and say, I only give you the truth, but I'm not the MD. I don't then go and implement it. I give you then what you need so that you can do your job. That's why we're a team. So there's 4 or 5 teams of different specialists now working together, and that's what we're doing. Let me give you some idea how carefully that last study was done. You know what a p-value is, of course. And if it's 0.025 or smaller at the 95% confidence limit, that means it was significant data. The autism study we did, the control versus the patients, okay, the p-value was 10 to the minus 13th power. Or 10 to the minus 15th power, or 10 to the minus 16th power, not 0.025. That's how carefully the study was designed. That's why I paid people $25,000 to review everything I was about to do for my IRB before I took one blood measurement. Okay. And then we were all about quality, which was unique in a study. My N, by the way, each measurement was made 25 times. Most people do. Yeah, a blood lab does 1. I wanted to give you an idea of how many people it took to do a $1.4 million study, how many doctors, how many nurses, how many technicians, how many grants. Okay, this is one $1.4 million study. The Heinz Endowment, Richard King Mellon Foundations, and several other corporations and some of the federal government all contributed to allow us to make these quality measurements. And now, if we have a few minutes left, I wanted to show you why measurements are so critical to also helping with the treatment and the, say, adjustment of the chemistry of the children, which is what my MD colleagues tell me they are able to do when they know what to do. So let's talk about a little bit of that. So we're looking at the individual body burden. We're looking at toxins in foods, dietary supplements. We want to look at improved health, and we want to lessen the severity of disease. So one of the things I want to look at was, okay, so let's take a look at vitamin pills, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, we've published this data. You're going to be horrified. Here you go.